My name is Vanessa, and this is a video about lawyer-on-lawyer bullying. In early 2024, I set my Law Society certificates on fire to protest bullying and abusive treatment from the Law Society of Manitoba. The Law Society of Manitoba didn't like that they had been caught on tape harassing and abusing me, and so they made a complaint to my Ontario legal regulator saying that I should take down the video. I believe that free speech is fundamental, and before I'm a lawyer, I'm a Canadian, and that it would be less than patriotic if I stayed quiet about what's going on in Manitoba. There's a real sick culture of bullying in the Manitoba Law Society, and I think it's infecting and poisoning the entire legal system in that province. My family first arrived in Winnipeg, Manitoba in 1901, and they moved to a small community called Swan River. And it was always my goal to be able to go back to the land. And my plan was to start my practice in the main city, and after things were up and running, to go to Swan River and make a quiet life there. So I'm getting ready to move my practice to Manitoba, and I start my call to the bar process. And then I posted my Manitoba website and advertising before I finished my Manitoba call to the bar. So this investigator, Bernardo, calls me, and the bullying started right away, and the lying started right away. And the investigator told me that she had been informed from the Manitoba PNP that only Manitoba lawyers can work with their program. And I knew there was just no way that Fanny Levy, the director of the Manitoba PNP, who'd been there for 15 years, I knew there was no way that she was saying that.
And I finally did connect with Ms. Levy today.
Okay.
She's going to get back to me, but she believes that you have to be a Manitoba lawyer or working through an agent who's a Manitoba lawyer in order to apply to the Manitoba Provincial Nominee Program on behalf of a client. But she's going to confirm that.
And who is she?
The director of the Provincial Nominee Program.
Sorry, what's her name again?
Fanny Levy. So I called the person you referred me to,
Yep.
and they referred me to her. So I just connected with her today.
So I had given this investigator Bernardo permission to call somebody that I knew at the PNP to clarify that lawyers from Ontario are totally allowed to use their program. And she didn't talk to the person that I referred her to. She talked to somebody who I had never met before, but was the director of the program. And keep in mind, this investigator knew that I was a young lawyer on my way to Manitoba to run my business doing immigration work with the PNP. And she just went to totally trash my reputation by talking to this unknown person. And she was giving me a summary that was absolutely not the truth. And it was about power, and it was about dominating me and bullying me. And this is very common in the legal profession. And as if that accusation wasn't bad enough, the investigator then accused me of a crime. And she accused me of perjury. She said that I had sworn a statement that I'm a Manitoba lawyer when I'm not. And she said that this was an accusation that was conveyed by the PNP. And I was totally stunned that she was accusing me of a crime that you would definitely get disbarred for if it was true. And then later on, when this was brought up to her manager, the CEO of the Law Society, they denied that it had ever been said. And at that time, they didn't know that I had the recording. So the Manitoba Law Society actually sent me a letter saying, we never accused you of signing a false statement. We never accused you of a crime. But listen for yourself and hear what she said.
She said that she thought you had to sign something when you're applying on behalf of a client that states you're a lawyer in Manitoba? Do you know? Do you recall?
I remember registering with them as a representative, and what they asked for was a copy of my license, and what I gave them was my Ontario license, and then they approved it. You know, what I had to provide was something that said I'm a member of the bar and a copy of my license, and I sent them that. So, no, I didn't sign a declaration saying that I'm a Manitoba lawyer.
Okay.
So by this time, I already knew that I was in serious trouble with the Manitoba Law Society because this investigator was lying to me and calling me a lot and harassing me. And I didn't really feel like I had a choice to call off my plan to move because I had been planning it for such a long time. Really cold. Like impossibly cold. Very cold. So I get to Winnipeg and I find the Law Society, and it's totally different than Ontario. It's basically upstairs from like a taco shop. And then I rented this really amazing office in the same building as the provincial nomination program. They let me put my sign downstairs, and it was fantastic for getting new business. I got everything from Kijiji. So I was like, okay, let's just forget it. I'm going to drop it for now. And it wasn't too long before there was another really weird misunderstanding with the Law Society. So I finished my registration paperwork and I had already moved out there and I was waiting for permission to start practicing. And then the registrar of the Law Society called me and he was like, okay, you're going to have your call to the bar in like a week or so. And I was thrilled, even though they didn't give me enough time to like invite anyone to come to the ceremony. I was still thrilled. So I went straight down to the Scotiabank at Portage in Maine. And I talked to a banker at Scotiabank, and his name is Jason Gray. And he was like a very like ambitious young up and coming banker at the Scotiabank. And I told him I needed to open a trust account, and because he couldn't find my name on the public directory from the Law Society, he actually ended up, unbeknownst to me, calling the Law Society for information on whether or not he could open a lawyer's trust account for me. So this banker calls the Law Society, and the first person he talked to was the treasurer. And she told him to talk to the registrar, and then he opened the bank account. So I didn't even know that those phone calls took place at the time. And I was just I waited for my call to the bar and I started doing business. And then a couple months later, I got this email from the treasurer of the Law Society. And she was like, you opened your account too early before you actually got your call to the bar. We need to see all of your like records and bank statements to see if you were using the account before you were allowed to. So I gave them the transcripts or the bank statements, and there was nothing on there that shouldn't be. I didn't do any transactions before my call to the bar. But I started asking the registrar and the treasurer, why did you give permission to the bank to open these accounts? If you were just going to come after me later, I feel like you're trying to catch me out in a violation. And then the story got once again like very confusing and convoluted. And then the registrar is like, now he's saying like, I absolutely never would tell them they could open those accounts early. And I'm like, but somebody told them that. And I think it was you. Keep in mind, when he's accusing Jason Gray at the Scotiabank of opening a regulated account in defiance of the provincial regulator, he's risking that guy's job. And I was like, are these people so sinister that they're willing to just destroy a young guy's career because you won't admit that you gave permission to open the trust account? Like, you're telling a story that kid If his boss believed you, he would lose his job. So at this point, I'm really freaking out inside because now I've already moved to Manitoba. And we had the first incident where they basically called the P&P. I told them they could call someone. I didn't say they could call anyone there. They called, they said I was under investigation. I don't know what kind of reputational damage happened. And then there was this weird accusation that supposedly came from the director of the P&P that lawyers from Ontario are not allowed to submit applications to their program, which was nonsense. And so I started thinking that maybe I'm imagining things, and I was very worried about being caught or set up in another one of these like scenarios. And so I went to a psychiatrist, and I started seeing a psychiatrist and a psychologist to basically establish whether or not I was losing my mind, because there was these like very serious interactions that were happening with the Law Society, and I couldn't make any sense of them. So everything quieted down for a while, and the firm started to take off, and I got like top 3 best rated immigration lawyer and like a bunch of other really good reviews online. And then I hired an employee who really misrepresented his qualifications, and he was one of these guys who had gone to the immigration consultant college. So this guy, his performance was terrible, and I was getting ready to let him go. And he came in on a Monday morning and he resigned. And we found out about an hour later that the day before he quit, he downloaded around 6,000 documents from my law firm server. And I was horrified because those were like 100 clients' top secret critical documents, passports, driver's license, everything. And the guy initially denied having taken any of it. And then when we explained, like, we have the server records, we know it was downloaded from your IP address at home. It took you 4 hours. Then he hired a lawyer, and his lawyer took the position that it was downloaded by accident. I had an employment contract with this employee that said if he wanted to use his own device, we had to be able to wipe it if he ever resigns, when he eventually leaves the company. So on the day he quit, he didn't bring the computer. I didn't have the ability to wipe it. He ended up downloading these thousands of documents. Then his lawyer, who works at a large law firm that does a lot of work for the government of Manitoba, called Tapper Cuddy, the law firm of Tapper Cuddy ended up taking possession of all of the stolen documents. And then I got a letter from the Law Society, and the Law Society said that essentially they've given permission to Jesse Geis, the lawyer for my former employee, to keep all of these client files in trust. Hold on, freeze frame for a second. I actually had a client named Don Woodstock go into the law firm of Tapper Cuddy and demand his material back from them. And when he did that, the management of Tapper Cuddy told him they don't have to give him anything back because the Law Society said they were allowed to keep all of this private material. In trust for who? I don't know. But the clients didn't know that all of their material was with another law firm. And I was really panicking at this point, and I was so freaking out because I felt like, how can I not tell the clients? And then the Law Society, they wouldn't give me instructions on whether or not I should tell the clients, and they told me I should go and get my own lawyer. Just when I thought that things couldn't get any worse, the investigator in charge of my file, she asked me for copies of several client files. And these were files that I had given an interview to CBC News about.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. A Winnipeg immigration lawyer says Manitoba's provincial nominee program is unfair. She's filed a lawsuit asking the courts to declare that.
These were client files that the applicants were so concerned about reprisals from the government of Manitoba that they didn't want to go on the record, and I had to conduct litigation on their behalf under my own name. So like very top secret files. The Law Society took these files from me in hard copy, and then when I asked for them back, they told me that all of the files had been lost in the hallway of the Manitoba P&P building where my office was. And I was just like, you guys lost my original files in the building that I share with like opposing counsel. You lost them in the hallway. And it was such a horrible moment because I felt like there was no support from the Law Society as it pertains to my data theft. And then they were like losing my documents. And then contrary to what the privacy regulation says, the Law Society investigator told me that it's my job to go and inform the clients about this. And it's totally the job of the organization who lost the material. And they just dumped that whole thing on me. And so at this point, I was getting physically very sick because I was pregnant and I had a very high risk pregnancy. And then I was sitting in my office and the phone rang and I couldn't bear to go to the phone because I was so overwhelmed about what am I going to do about these files that the Law Society has now lost and then washed their hands of. Oh yeah, breaking in here for another freeze frame. So the day before what I'm about to describe, I emailed the Law Society and I said that emotionally I cannot handle dealing with them directly and that it's very important that they contact my lawyer. And so this is what happened the day after I told them, please send all communication to my lawyer. And just to point out, it's not just what I required for my mental health. It's the fucking law. It's the law that if somebody's represented, you don't get to call them directly every day. You don't get to send your cronies to call them. If somebody's represented, you're supposed to go through their representation, but they just wouldn't do it. And I hear my staff answer the phone and I play back the call a couple minutes later, and it's the Law Society calling, not to see how they can offer any kind of assistance about the files that they lost. They were calling to say that they're ready to audit me.
This call is being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, please disconnect at this time.
The law office of Vanessa Routley, how can I help you?
Hi, may I speak to Vanessa, please?
Are you an existing client?
Oh no, I'm calling from the Law Society.
So I had just told the Law Society to go through my legal representation. And once again, this was all about power. And the same investigator who was tormenting me the whole time, she had obviously gone up the hall or sent a little instant message to her friend in the auditing department and tell them that they should say that they're ready to conduct a random audit on me. And it was so abusive. When I objected to this kind of nonsense, the CEO of the Manitoba Law Society, Kristen Dangerfield, she absolutely endorsed everything that went on. And of course, there'll never be any evidence of any kind that I was next on some sort of list for an audit, a random audit, because they were calling me to target me and to harass me. And in other professions, when you have a serious concern with management, you quit or you go on strike or you do some type of civil action. But when you're a sole practitioner in the crosshairs of a really bad investigator or a bad system, the only thing that you can do is either get disbarred or disappear during the process. Of course, me and my lawyer tried to report the bullying and the lawyer that was behind all of this, and we tried to report it to the CEO of the Law Society. She dismissed the complaint, and she never gave us the standard, you have 30 days to take this up with the civilian oversight person. So they just completely ignore the rule of law. And the Law Society in Manitoba, they're not beholden to any kind of rule of law principles. They didn't give me the right to appeal. So you just have this little gang of bad people running the Law Society of Manitoba, and they can do basically whatever they want, and they will not do any kind of real investigation into their own employees. And my anger at my situation and my inability to fix it and my total frustration, it turned inwards and it turned into depression, and it made me really, really sick. And so here I am on the airplane on my way back to Toronto when I gave up everything that I had worked for in. So my partner, the father of the baby that I was expecting, little Carmen, he worked on a work permit in Winnipeg, and he had a 3-year contract that he couldn't just walk away from, doing like infrastructure and wastewater treatment stuff. So I had to go back to Ontario alone with my big pregnant belly because of the bullying. Well, so now it's May of 2021, and I'm 9 months pregnant, and I'm recording this video from Toronto. So the Law Society of Manitoba has been investigating me since February of last year, which is around 15 months ago. I've been trying not to think about the audit that's apparently still continuing today, but having this whole situation drag out for such a long time is always in the back of my mind. After the baby was born, my partner was able to come to Toronto for 3 or 4 weeks, but he wanted me to come back to Winnipeg with him, and I was afraid to. I was afraid that they would start a new case against me, and so I wasn't able to bring our family together. And I ended up going to stay with my mother-in-law in another country. And it was just me and the baby and grandma. And I got really, really bad postpartum depression. I couldn't figure out how to restart my work after having to flee the province of Manitoba. When I refused to come back to Winnipeg with the baby, I ended up having a custody dispute with my partner. And during that custody dispute, the baby ended up in Mexico. I was in Toronto. Papa was in Winnipeg, and it was a disaster. I lost track of my professional obligations to pay my fees on time, and my license went into an administrative suspension. Someone in Winnipeg heard about that, and the Winnipeg Law Society referred a client of mine to the Ontario Law Society to make a complaint about me for practicing without a valid law license. And I really felt like things were starting to spiral out of control. I made a video to talk about all of these events because I want other people who are going through similar professional bullying and legal bullying and lawfare to know that they're not alone. But after I posted this video, the Law Society of Manitoba filed another false complaint against me, and they started to lie and say that these recordings had been made in secret. And I showed them the proof that they heard warnings every time they called the law firm that all calls are recorded, But they still submitted a complaint against me in the province of Ontario that started off with the lie that I had secretly recorded people. And so this has now been from 2017 until the end of 2024 that the Manitoba Law Society has been basically after me and bullying me and targeting me. And I recently realized that my tormentor has been promoted to a new position as the director of equity. So the person who you're supposed to go to for help when you're being bullied in the legal profession. Manitoba, you really need to clean things up at your law society. It's impossible to articulate how much pain and suffering a bully can do to you. It's especially traumatizing when you get the cycle fatigue like I have, because it's been going on for so many years. And so I think I did the right thing by burning my Manitoba law license. And I'm grateful for everyone who's stayed tuned for this whole 25 minutes to hear my story. I literally have nothing left to give as a lawyer. This has taken all of my energy for so many years, and that's the reason I don't want to practice anymore.